Welcome to part two of the story I'm going to tell you here. So, in the last episode, which was the first one, there was a bit of an introduction to myself and the things I plan to do here. And at the end of the last episode, there was a little bit of photos from my previous apartment, which was a studio of about less than 500 square feet, which is where we used to live with a toddler and a baby. And then we were kind of forced out of there because one morning I woke up to the toilet kind of gurgling a little bit, and it had been doing that for maybe a day before. Like, there was just a weird sound, and we were on the ground floor. Like, it was kind of odd, and then when I went to flush it, it didn't flush. It started filling up, and it filled up, and it kind of stayed at that level, like right at the top, but then it was like trickling down. So I informed the super, who was living like right next door, and he came in, and I thought this was okay. Like, he knew what was going on. I assumed it was going to get taken care of, and I had to take my kid to a 3 hour summer camp. So I was going to leave with both the kids and then come back like 5 hours later because there's a commute, etc., etc. So when I came back, there was like a puddle on the ground of sewage, and it wasn't yet, it was just like the toilet overflowing at that point. It wasn't quite the sewage like with chunks and stuff. So I went to the super again, and he was like, yeah, somebody's on it, but they're not, or they're coming, or somebody's coming. I let somebody know, and there's like a language barrier, of course. So I go back inside, and one of my rugs that was in this little space right outside the toilet, it was soaked. So I think I was at this point like, this is fully under control still. This is fine. So I took the rug, maybe I put it in the bathtub. Then I took like, cleaned up the sewage best as I could. And like I said, it was, at this point, it was just like clear toilet water. And I don't remember if it just increased all of a sudden or if somebody started working on it and it increased all of a sudden. It may be that somebody did show up and they were trying to, with the toilet itself. I think this is what happened. When somebody finally came in the afternoon, they were trying to unclog the toilet itself, and that caused like a very big gush of sewage into the apartment. And I know that at some point, and I'm not sure the timeline exactly, but I could hear people flushing their toilet upstairs, and all of that would come straight into the apartment also, because I could like hear the sound of somebody else's water in the same on the same line, and then there would be like a big increase of the toilet, of water coming out of the toilet. At this point, it was not possible for me, because what I was doing before was grabbing rags and just like mopping it up and then dumping it, like wringing the rag out into the bathtub. But at that point, it was just like not possible to keep up with that whatsoever. And there were like people in here. And I think I just like had the kids down here too, and it was like smelly. And my neighbor upstairs kept saying like, at least like bring the kids up, don't be in there. And I thought like, well, I need to be in here because I need to see what's going on, or I don't know, or try to like keep up with the mess. But she like insisted that I at least bring the kids up. And I didn't want to like put her out, but I did take my kids up, and she has a son, so like they were playing together, whatever. So I stayed downstairs, and I had to put on like my rain shoes, because it was like, at this point I think it was like halfway soaking into the living room rug. And so there was like several hours between like when my husband came home, and I think at some point I did go upstairs to her apartment. And when the crew who came to work on this, they were actually gone like most of the time, because they were here in the apartment trying for with the toilet, and then there was like a fountain just spraying like raw sewage out of the toilet, and then it started filling the tub, and then the tub was overflowing with the raw sewage, and the kitchen and the bathroom sink. The kitchen sink was fine, but the water had spread so much that it went into the kitchen via the floor. There was also sewage coming through the wall between my apartment and a neighbor's apartment. So I don't even know, like, maybe their toilet was doing the same thing. So that's where that water was coming. And then my husband came home. I mean, I was like sending him messages like, say goodbye to all of our stuff. And he's like, what do you mean? And I would like show him pictures, and he was like, what do we do? Like, I think everything that can be done is being done right now. So he got home. Like, I had been trying to call the super, because I'm like, we can't stay here tonight. And I knew that there were vacant apartments in the building. So I was absolutely sure, there was no doubt in my mind that if I told the super that he would tell the landlord just like how bad it was, I was absolutely sure that the landlord would come here to see it for himself, and or I was absolutely sure that he would offer us somewhere to stay while this is taken care of. But he didn't even acknowledge the situation, and he's local, he lives in the city. But he didn't even say, like, I'm aware of the situation, stand by, or nothing. It's like as if we didn't exist, as if this apartment didn't exist, as if this wasn't his problem. And apparently, like, this line was so blocked that they had to like go outside and access something through somewhere else. I don't know if it was a sewer or what. So then my husband was like livid. He was like just so angry that nobody was getting back to us. And it was like 5 p.m., 6 p.m. And I'm like, he's gonna tell us that we can like go somewhere else, right? Like, there are at least two vacant apartments in this building right now. And like, we could sleep on the floor, we'll grab some blankets, whatever. And I asked the super, I'm like, hey, have you asked, like, can we get the keys to a vacant apartment? Can we, like, put some of our stuff there just for a few days while this is sorted out? And he was like, no, I talked to the landlord, and he said, don't let them into any other properties. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, like, he could have told me that, but he didn't. He just like pretended this wasn't happening, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So eventually, like, the neighbor upstairs was like, you guys go have dinner somewhere, I got the kids, like, you're welcome to stay here. I just could not believe that the the landlord would just be like completely missing in action. Like, even though he was aware of the situation, he wouldn't even like extend us the courtesy to like text or email back or call back. So so we tried to find a hotel, and we like walked up and down the street. There's a couple of hotels, and the problem is that like they're mostly for illicit activities, so they're like rented by the hour or rented by, yeah. And like, that was super awkward, because people are looking at us like, why are you here with children? There was one, And then also, so many of them are turned into shelters that they weren't even hotels that were accepting guests. So there was one that was like $200 a night, but I don't even think they had any rooms at all. There was one that was sleazy, and there was one that was a shelter. So I'm walking around like with the kids at maybe like 9 or 10 p.m., and like everyone's just angry and seizing, like especially my husband. I'm just trying to like deal with the situation, like we're gonna need a place to stay, focus on that. But he was like really angry that this was happening and that like the landlord wasn't getting back to us. So like our tensions were high, and he would just like walk off and walk towards somewhere where I was like, I know that place is a shelter. Like that's, and I was like trying to like yell for him, like come back. Let's like stop and think about this. Anyway, we ended up coming back to my neighbors and slept on their floor. And I had this, um, my kid had camp for the next 3 days. So I would get up at her house, get the baby ready. We would eat out like every meal because I didn't want to like get groceries and cook in our kitchen. Plus, we were out for like until the afternoon. And usually, like if I was at my house, I would pack lunch for us. But like eating out 3 meals a day is so expensive with kids, especially, and just like carting around leftover food. It was it was August, I think, or July. I think it was August. So it was like super hot and humid. And like that's part of not having a place to live, is like all the other expenses that you're accruing. Like, not even though we lucked out with our neighbor being able to host us for a few days, we lucked out with the housing, but like getting all the meals out was a really big expense. Like, and that's something I always keep in mind with, people who don't have secure housing, is obviously like there are so many other factors that play into it. Anyway, then I was working on trying to find an I guess for the first day or two, I was still like, the landlord has to get back to us and offer us a solution, right? Because they did stop that raw sewage flooding. They did stop that like at maybe 11, 10, or like we were still there. So this is probably, I was still like, okay, well, maybe we can stay in the building still until like 10 or 11. And then once the actual sewage was stopped coming in, the super with his wife were like using like t-shirts and rags to mop it up. And we had like a carpet that was, I don't know how, it was at least like 12 by 12 feet. So that had like been completely soaked. It was not sanitary to stay here, obviously. And I just thought that maybe the landlord would like put us up somewhere for 3 days while the place gets professionally cleaned. I had no reason to assume that wouldn't happen. So I did my best, and after the second and a half day, I was just like, he doesn't care. He's not getting back to me. He just expects us to keep living here when half of our belongings, the kids' bunk bed, their bedding, because one was like on the floor, the mattress was like actually on the floor, and the other one is like a Cora bed from IKEA, so the bottom part, we just had a mattress on the floor, so that was soaked. Anything that was on the floor is pretty much ruined. I managed to move the couches. He just expects us to like keep living there as if nothing happened, but I don't think that just mopping up whatever I could have done, I don't think that would have been enough to feel like, oh, I can just keep living here and not smell sewage constantly. It needs like industrial chemicals to get through like the sludge, and like there were still like chunks of sewage, which is not somewhere you want to have kids, especially also. So I think that and while my kid was at camp, like I would call the landlord constantly. I would just have him on speed dial and just it would just like ring and ring and like leave a message. And so he was just dodging my calls until like 2 days later, all of a sudden he picked up, and it was I think my husband had like called and from a different number called and threatened to get like a lawyer involved. And he did pick up, and he was like in this really nasty voice. He was just like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, "We need a place to live. What do you mean, what do I want? I can't." This place was like cleaned up with t-shirts. They found some fabric we had and just threw that into the sewage. It was like a curtain we had that was folded up on a shelf or something. Like they just grabbed whatever they could and just threw it into the sewage. And I'm like, this is not acceptable. I need a place to live. And he's like, well, come look at this apartment. It's like yours, except it wasn't. And you can move in right now and pay me the same amount. And I'm like, can we just live there for 3 days or 2 weeks while like this apartment gets I don't know, professionally cleaned? And he's like, no, I'd really prefer that you sign a lease today. So he wants me to sign a lease today for a different apartment. And I'm like, can you tell me if it is an option for us to stay there for a few days? Because I don't want to move. I would rather get this place cleaned professionally, get rid of our stuff that got ruined, you know. I don't even think I said anything about like compensation for the furniture that we lost and like bedding and things like that or everything. And because I was like still operating under the impression like, oh, this kind of thing happens, it's on us because we don't have renter's insurance, but at least like help to make this livable again while we have somewhere to stay. And he's like, no, it's not possible for you to stay somewhere for a couple of days. You would have to sign a lease. So I went and looked at this apartment, this other apartment that he offered, and it was maybe a third of the size of ours. So it was another studio, but like our studio was maybe like 400 something, like 450 square feet. And this was, I don't know, maybe 300 square feet. And I just said, like, no, that's not gonna work. I mean, if you let it, like I said, if you let us stay here for like 3 days, we'll just grab or a week or whatever, I'll just grab like the essentials and I would stay here for a few days, but this is not a possibility for long term. And he was just like, well, that's what I can do for you. And I'm like, there's no reason to live with a person, you know, to have a landlord who doesn't care to this degree. And according to the law, if there's a condition in the apartment that makes it not hospitable or whatever it's called, not livable, then you have full right to just hand over your keys and break the lease and go. And I decided we're going to do that because I just didn't want to live under this guy's control or whatever it is. And this is not the first time that a similar thing happened. There was like a week without heat in the middle of the winter, and they did, after like a day, they did hook up like an external boiler, but while they were trying to fix the heat, somehow every time the heat would kick on, there was this like huge rattle and water would pour out of the walls. So I guess like the where the pipe went through the unit above or whatever, or the radiator would just leak, but it was like a torrent of water that came out of the ceiling, like between the ceiling and the wall. And I kept calling the landlord and being like, hey, every like hour or so this torrent of water comes out from the wall. Whatever they're like working on made that happen, and it needs to be resolved ASAP because I'm not, even though I'm home a lot, like I'm not always home to catch it. And then it's like several buckets of water just pour out of the ceiling. And nothing, no, like no getting back to us on any level, no acknowledgement of the situation. And it went on for like over a month. And I had to make a video, put it on a DVD, and send it to his P.O. box. And then somebody came and he never responded. It's just like one of the workers came and like saw it happening and like eventually got fixed, but just the lack of acknowledging that this person who lives on my property is having a major issue. I was like, this could be causing mold in the walls. There was also another apartment we wanted to take over, and we knew the people who lived there and they were moving out. So we looked at it and I was like, hey, can we move into this apartment? No response. None whatsoever. And I was like, okay, it's just busy. And the response never happened and somebody else moved in. Why not just say like, no, you can't? And it was vacant for a good like 6 months. It's not like he had somebody lined up to live there. So that is the story of how we ended up in this place. And the story with this place is equally as intriguing. It is below market rate because there are some seriously severe things wrong with this apartment. However, for the space, we doubled the space of our former one and actually have like rooms with doors, which is pretty great. In the previous one, we just had put in like a divider, and we just got like a kids area set up that had the beds, and it had like a curtain around the beds, and also it had a door. But that all had to get scrapped, and all of that furniture had to be just left there because it was just like sitting in the sewage. So in this place, like the kids got their own room, which is awesome, and we got our like office space, like workspace back, because we both do creative projects and things, so we have space to do for that, because in the last one we had to sacrifice that for the kids area. So I have maybe 5 minutes to explain something else that was coincidentally involved during this time period. As you might have seen from the first video, I got involved in some woo, and within a week of this event, which got us out of our previous apartment, I have done two things. One was I did my first ancestral ritual, and I did that in the bathroom. And I don't know if, why, or how those events were connected, but since it was a studio apartment, I was doing it at night. I didn't want to bother anyone or wake anyone up. And it's not like I was super loud or anything, but it just involves lighting candles, calling my ancestors, making offerings. And the only place I could do that in private was to go into the bathroom once everybody was asleep. And then, coincidentally or not, just a couple of days later, the toilet like pretty much explodes. And the place we ended up moving into is built in 1928, which is the same year that my grandmother was born. And she lived in an apartment that was also built in 1928, same year as herself. And she always remarked on that. She lived there from the 50s until the end. And there are a lot of similarities in this apartment just based on the time it was built. It even has a similar smell. One of the people involved was Russian, not the owner, but there was a component of this seeming like really serendipitous given the year of this apartment, and that I had just done this ritual connecting with especially my grandmother And the other thing that I did was to have a vision board, which I made with the help of Karen Chong's manifestation workshop. And I had found out, because I've never done anything like this before, like I wasn't really spiritual or anything, I had found out that manifestation is, you're not supposed to know how those things would come through. And that was the sort of news to me that I didn't understand at the point. So on this vision board that I created was a bigger kitchen. And as you can see, the kitchen that I had before from the previous video, there's a photo of it, and it's just like very narrow, maybe 2 feet between like the wall and the kitchen stuff. So this one, there's like enough room to put a table in there so you can eat inside of the kitchen, which is pretty amazing. I don't think I've ever lived in a New York apartment where you could put a table inside of the kitchen. So I put these things on the vision board and being very conscious that I don't know how this is going to happen, which was to the contrary of how I would think of it previously, to say, like, well, somebody would have to make more money, and then that's the only way this apartment could materialize, is if our financial situation improved. But what ended up happening was that we are not paying very much more for this apartment, which is much larger. And it did come with huge caveats. Like you saw in the previous video, my husband pretty much got renovated the kitchen. So that, I think, is a very big story of how this all came to be. In the next video, I'll go more into the trials or tribulations of moving into this apartment.